Okay, so we need to talk about Jynx. I know, this is one of those topics where everyone's already made up their mind, right? Either you think it's racist or you think people are overreacting. But here's the thing. I spent weeks researching this, and the actual answer, it's way more interesting than either side of the argument realizes. Because Jynx isn't what you think it is. The controversy makes sense when you see it from a Western perspective, but when you understand the actual cultural context, everything changes. So stick around because by the end of this video, you're gonna see this whole situation completely differently. Let me walk you through this. Alright, so full transparency here, I grew up playing Pokémon Red. I had a Jynx on my team, and when the controversy happened in the early 2000s, I was completely confused. Like, I was a kid, I didn't see what everyone was seeing. To me, it was just a weird ice Pokémon that looked kinda creepy. But as I got older, I started understanding why people were upset. The black face, the big lips, yeah, I get it. If you don't know the context, it looks really bad. So recently, I decided to actually dig into this, not just read what other people said, but go back to the original sources. Japanese folklore, traditional theater, fashion trends from the 90s, all of it. And what I found was fascinating, because the truth is, Jynx isn't racist, but the reason people thought it was, that's actually a really interesting story about how cultural context gets completely lost in translation. Let me explain what I mean. So first, let's talk about what everyone saw in the year 2000. Pokémon is blowing up worldwide. It's the biggest kids franchise on the planet. And then people start looking closer at the designs. And there's this one Pokémon, Jynx. Black face, big pink lips, blonde hair, dancing around, and immediately people made a connection to blackface minstrel shows from American history, which, if you don't know, were these incredibly racist performances where white people would paint their faces black and mock black Americans. So when parents saw Jynx, they freaked out. How could Nintendo, this family-friendly company, put something like that in a kid's game? The backlash was massive. There were protests, news articles, even civil rights groups got involved. And honestly, if you're looking at Jynx through a Western lens with no other context, I completely understand why people were upset. The imagery is there, the resemblance is there. But here's where it gets interesting, because Jynx wasn't designed by Americans, it was designed by Japanese developers, and they weren't thinking about American history at all. They were thinking about something completely different. Something from their own culture that most Western audiences had never even heard of. Real quick before we get into the actual origin, if you're enjoying this kind of breakdown, this is basically what this channel is about. I like digging into the history and cultural context behind game designs that everyone thinks they already understand. So if that's your thing, you'll probably want to stick around. Alright, back to Jynx, because this is where it actually gets interesting. So, the actual inspiration for Jynx is a creature from Japanese folklore called the Yama-uba, or sometimes written as Yamanamba. Now, if you've never heard of this, don't worry, most people outside Japan haven't. The Yama-uba is the supernatural mountain witch from old Japanese stories, and she's not a pleasant character. In the original folklore, she's described as this cannibalistic demon that lives in the mountains and feeds on travelers. Specifically, she has a taste for children. Yeah, not exactly the wholesome Pokémon vibe we're used to. But here's where it connects to Jynx. The Yama-uba is always described with long, golden white hair. She wears a tattered red kimono, and she's known for this seductive, hypnotic dance that she uses to lure people in. Sound familiar? Jynx has blonde hair, wears a red dress, and if you look at literally any Pokédex entry for Jynx across the entire series, they all mention dancing. Pokémon Red, it seductively wiggles its hips as it walks. It can cause people to dance in unison with it. Pokémon Yellow appears to move to a rhythm of its own, as if it were dancing. Pokémon Gold, it rocks its body rhythmically. Every single entry mentions dancing, not its ice powers, not its psychic abilities, dancing. Because that's what the Yama-uba is known for, this mesmerizing, almost magical dance. So we've got the hair, the red clothing, and the dancing. That's three major design elements directly from this folklore creature. But that still doesn't explain the black face and the lips, right? Yeah, that's where things get even interesting. So to understand Jynx's face, we need to talk about no theater. No is this traditional form of Japanese musical drama that dates back to like the 14th century. It's one of the oldest forms of theater still performed today. And one of the classic stories in No is about the Yamauba. In the play, there's this dancer who's traveling through the mountains on a pilgrimage. She meets this mysterious old woman who demands that she perform a dance. The dancer realizes this old woman is actually the Yamauba, the mountain demon. And she's terrified because she knows if she refuses, she'll be eaten. But plot twist, it's actually the Yamauba who ends up performing this long, elaborate dance at the end of the play. Now here's the key part. In No theater, when actors play the role of Yamauba, they wear this traditional costume that includes heavy makeup. And that makeup, it's dark, really dark. It's not meant to represent race, it's meant to represent that she's a mountain spirit, someone who lives outside in the wilderness, exposed to the elements, tanned and weathered from living in nature. This is a theatrical tradition that's been around in Japan for centuries. And here's something else. In the 1990s, around the same time Pokémon was being developed, there was this fashion trend in Japan called ganguru. Ganguru girls would tan their skin really dark, wear blonde wigs or dye their hair blonde, and wear bright, exaggerated makeup. And one specific style of ganguru was actually called Yamamamba, named directly after the Yamauba. So in 1990s Japan, when Game Freak was designing Pokémon, the Yamauba was very much in the cultural consciousness. It wasn't some obscure folklore thing, it was referenced in fashion, in theater, in popular culture. The blackface on Jynx, it's not blackface in the American sense, it's the traditional No theater representation of a mountain spirit. The big lips, those are part of the theatrical costume design for Yamauba characters. Everything about Jynx's design makes perfect sense if you know the cultural context. So here's the thing that's really important to understand. This wasn't a case of Nintendo being intentionally offensive, but it also wasn't a case of people being overly sensitive. What happened was a complete cultural disconnect. American audiences looked at Jynx and saw imagery that, in their cultural context, was deeply offensive, and they had every right to be concerned about that. But Japanese designers created Jynx based on their own cultural folklore. They never even considered how it might be interpreted in the West, because that imagery means something completely different in Japan. It's not that one side was right and the other was wrong, it's that both sides were operating from completely different cultural frameworks. And that's actually a really important lesson about how media travels across cultures. Things that are totally innocent in one place can be deeply offensive in another, not because anyone had bad intentions, but because context matters. Nintendo actually acknowledged this. They changed Jynx's skin color from black to purple in later games, and in the anime. Not because they admitted wrongdoing, but because they recognized that regardless of intent, the design was causing harm to people, and I think that's the right approach. So, what do you think? Does knowing the cultural context change how you see Jynx? Or do you think the design was problematic regardless of the intent? I'm genuinely curious about your take on this. Drop a comment and let's have an actual conversation about it. And if this video gave you a new perspective on something you thought you already understood, hit that subscribe button, because this is what we do here at Hidden Pixel. We dig into the cultural context, the history, the stories behind the games that everyone thinks they already know. New video essays every week. So here's my take on this whole thing. Jynx isn't racist. The design comes from Japanese folklore and traditional theater, and every element of it makes perfect sense if you understand that context. But the controversy wasn't fake or overblown either. When a design crosses cultures, intent doesn't always matter as much as impact. What matters is that we actually take the time to understand these things, instead of just picking a side and yelling at each other. Because the real story here isn't Nintendo is racist or people are too sensitive. The real story is about how complicated it is when media travels across cultures, and how easy it is for meaning to get completely lost in translation. And honestly, that's way more interesting than just another internet argument. Anyway, that's my deep dive on Jynx. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.